Welcome to Life After Divorce podcast, and I'm your host, Patricia Leving, a separation and divorce coach. I'm so happy that you're here to join us today because our topic is co-parenting after divorce. I feel it's important to all our listeners to have an opportunity to get to hear real life stories and actual experiences that people go through when they are faced with a separation and divorce. So I'm really excited to invite Peter as our guest today. So welcome, Peter.
Thank you for having me.
So Peter, how long were you married?
I was married for a little over 3 years.
Mm-hmm. And how was your marriage?
Oh, well, like any marriage, when it starts out, it's wonderful. As time progressed, it wasn't as wonderful. We were, our communication was starting to break down.
And breaking down in what way? That you just sort of didn't have the right tools to talk back and forth, or you just didn't communicate at all?
Well, it got to the point where we weren't really communicating at all near the end. But, I worked at a job where I worked a lot of hours.
Mm.
And so I was hardly home during that time. At the same time, she was in her own business also, uh, selling Mary Kay products. And having two kids, one from a previous marriage and my own flesh and blood. So there's a lot of buildup over time where we were just starting to break down.
So you had to deal with a blended family as well, I gather.
Yeah, no, exactly. And don't get me wrong, it's you know her son from the first marriage was a great kid. It was a learning curve for me to starting out with a instant family, and that is that can be really tough for anybody starting into a relationship. And but in the beginning, it was working out well.
Mhm. I can only imagine how that is, like getting married and already having your instant family. Um, and then how long after did your son come along?
Well, we were married in '96, and my son was born in '97. It was a great time for our family. A new addition to the family, and it was great. But over the years, things started to wear down.
Hmm. What age difference were the children?
9.
Oh, so there was kind of a big gap there between.
Actually, yeah. Hold on a second. I got to think about it. It's not actually 9. It was 6 years difference. Sorry.
Uh-huh. 6 years. So that's still a bit of a gap between the two boys.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Did they
But
get along though?
the boys got along. The older one did a lot of stuff with the baby, and good team to be with.
Oh, well, that's good. What type of parenting styles did you have?
Our parenting styles were slightly different. At the same time, though, is because I was away during the day most during the week. She's the one that did all the work in the beginning because she was home, and she was a good mom. She always took care of the kids. She always did her best by the kids, and she was great.
Hmm. And how old was your son when you decided to have this divorce?
We by the time we got divorced, he was 4. And when you're going into a divorce, it's like any relationship. When you're not communicating and emotions are flared, and you have to remember on why what you're there for. And it's not for the parents, it's for your kids.
Yeah.
And so when it came down to that, we agreed that we would try and focus in on the boys and saying, just because we can't live together doesn't mean that, we're going to stop seeing each other because, I want to see the kids. Eventually, the older brother went to his dad's place, and his dad moved to the States. So it ended up just after a while just being my boy and I and his mom.
So communication is a really difficult thing if you're not communicating properly within a marriage, because that is one of the factors why people do have a divorce. And did you find that you were able to communicate better after you were separated, or did you find it still difficult?
Well, after we separated, because actually when we were divorced a year later, so our divorce was quite quick compared to most people who go through the divorce. And even after that, it took a little time for us to be able to actually get together and talk to each other. It's not to say that we weren't talking about anything, because when we talk about our son. Um, and that's the thing. The biggest issue is any relationship is the communication. We felt it was important to make sure that we did communicate. And it was also when we were separating, those were also something that we put into our separation agreement, saying if certain things happen, we need to inform the other parent. And one of the main reasons why we did that is because we had joint custody.
Mhm.
All the custody wasn't just solely hers. We had joint custody. Um, you could say it was a 50-50 kind of custody, but because she was
The
that's where
primary care.
the primary parent, because he was living with her, starting up with school and everything. That's where the finances would go to. And I'd see my boy almost every single weekend. After a while, not in the beginning, it would be every other weekend. But eventually it got to be, I see him every weekend as he got older.
Mhm. And you were able to arrange that with her. So did you have to fight for that through a court system, or you basically just were able to communicate that and say, I'll start taking him every weekend?
We were able to communicate that, and uh, and we, as time progressed, the emotions were settled down, and we were able to talk things through like normal people. You know, we still cared about each other.
Mhm.
Like we brought a beautiful boy into this world. So there had to be something there initially for us to get together. And even though we never got back to together as, living together or being husband and wife a second time, every time, Christmas would come up, she was always invited to our table for Christmas dinner. And, special events, if her birthday was coming up, uh, we would make note of that and make sure that my boy would, go out and say, happy birthday, and here's a present for you or a card, because we wanted to make sure that that was important and, that it was carried on and important dates came up to do something about them.
So that was actually a good part of co-parenting, because it can be workable and you can work things out. You can create a system. And that's what I'm hearing from you, is that you were able to do that. Even though you did have a divorce, you still wanted to keep sort of the family connected. Did that interfere with any relationships that you had or she had as you moved on?
As time progressed, yeah, it was hard to have a relationship. For the longest time, I just didn't want one or get into one. She had had a bunch of relationships that didn't work out for her, which is unfortunate for her, because I wanted her happy. As my boy got older, the more time we could free up and see other people.
Mhm.
Because in the beginning, it was all him.
Yeah. How did your son adapt to the separation between parents? Like as you were, you know, separated, how did he adapt to going to mom's home and dad's home? How did that work?
Oh, it was tough. It wasn't an easy transit. It's not an easy transition for any child. And one of the things I don't know what made me think of it at the time, but something, helped him understand is this is not your fault. Your dad and mom can't, even though we care about each other, we just can't live together anymore.
Yeah.
And, you know, we both love you and we both want to be with you. So, but now you have two houses to go to, not just one. Through his understanding to his level that he was okay with that. It was still a long process for him because it still affected him immensely, like any child. And but it's learning to communicate with him and understand on what he was thinking and where he was coming from. That you know he's a grown adult now, and I'm proud of him.
So did you create like a schedule? How did you work things out together? I know you said that you've seen him every weekend, but was his behavior different with you than it was with his mom? And did you notice any changes that way?
Oh yeah, he definitely had different ways of being dealt with. With his mom, uh, between his mom and I. It's kind of hard to remember how things went, but she did a lot of reward and consequences type of thing, and which worked for her. And for I handle things differently on my end. Uh, but at the same time, we try to communicate and saying, this is what's happening. And he started at a young age. He knows how to play his parents.
And did he? Did he play
Oh
you
yeah,
both?
he
Yeah.
played on both of us. But at the same time, you know, we turn around to each other and say, if I called your mom, is she gonna say yes to this? And a couple of times we caught him. It's like no, or yes, and it's like so we were able to call each other and say, look, this is what's happening, or what do you think? It's so working together, on the communication on how we were taking care of our son was the best thing for him. It was still a single, even though we were separate, it was still, one kind of focus in his life, one rule.
So you basically really created some sort of structure in the parenting, and you both sort of stayed in
Yeah,
tune with each other so that he wasn't playing you, and that he was still sort of getting the fair part of being both sides of the parents' rules, I gather.
exactly. Yes.
Mhm. But did you recall any challenges along the way? Did you have any moments where you thought, wow, this is a lot harder than I thought, or it's not so bad? Like, what did you think?
I think like any parent, you have your good days and your bad days. When I would come home from work or when I'd be leaving for work, when you're tired, it's hard to deal with, I don't want to say deal with a child, but hard to, meet their needs. And that's what you're trying to do is, they're growing up, you want to meet their needs. So when they grow up, they're going to be the best that they can be. But when we got to go away on camping trips, for example, um, you know it was a stress relief for both of us. There were a lot of kids for him to play with, and it was also a community of parents and kids. So as what do they call it, the village, where it takes a village to take care of a child and help them grow. And that's how it was for camping. So, I was very, fortunate to find a group that would, that was like that.
So did you get a lot of resources from that group, like in different ways from other parents as well? Or were they all single parents as well from this group?
Well, yeah, they were all single parents, it was, parents without partners. And, they were at all different stages of parenting. And when I joined, it it was a stage where they were mostly young. And you go to Chuck E. Cheese, or you go to the Spaghetti Factory, or you go camping, or tobogganing, or like there was a lot of activities that that were done to help have the fun with the kids. And the parents got to mingle with other people and talk adult talk, which is also important, because when you're always talking to your kids, and you're trying to use simple words for them to understand, it's and then when you go to talk to somebody who's your age, it's like, okay, I have to change my hat now, because now I'm talking to big people, not little people.
Yeah, exactly. And so I gather you recall that there's support groups is a good thing to have, or any type of support. What do you recommend?
Well, a support group is definitely important. You need to be able to have an outlet where not only can you get your kids to go out and play, but you also have to be with other people who are like-minded, like single parents, who who are going through different stages of their life also. Um, because and when you got the ones with the young kids, you can sit there saying, yes, I've been through that. This is how I handled it. And at the same time, you can talk to, you're looking at the people who are ahead of you and saying, how did you handle this? What was your experience? Because I'm coming to that point, and so it's good to be into a mixture of that, but you also have to make sure that you're finding a group that makes you feel safe, because you don't want to get into a group where they point fingers, or say, look how they're treating their child. And that's not what it's all about. It's saying, I'm looking for somebody that I can talk to because I need help myself. And my child needs to be able to grow and mature at the same time, and mingle with people. They need a social outlet themselves, which is very important.
It is. I really believe in support groups, or I believe in, reaching out and getting some coaching or counseling, as I do offer programs myself for people that are going through these difficulties in divorce. What type of experience did you have when he was going through school, like with your co-parent? And how was his education going? Did you have to set up a program? Did you go see the teacher? So I'd be curious how that works out as a co-parent.
As Ben matured in high school, Ben's very musical. He played, when he started out, he was playing the drums. And as he progressed, he was also a person who was able to teach himself music, going from the drums to a French horn, and bass guitar, electric guitar, acoustic guitar. He's very musical. He even built his own keyboard, and so he's very handy that way. So in that department, he was very artistic, and he does a lot of he does drawings, and he's very good at drawing. At this stage of his life, he does commission drawings for people that want different things. It's not necessarily everybody's art, but it's the art that helps him get through things.
Do you think that he kind of went through that area because of the separation divorce, or do you just feel that he picked that up on his own and wanted to be this creative child?
I think a lot of it came through naturally. I think he do well in mathematics and well, his mom, when he was growing up, through school, he'd always done really, pretty good. Or I should say he did well. We all had the courses that we don't like when we went to school, so we wouldn't do as well in those. But he always tried. And but when it came to music, and he picked up on it right away. And his artwork, he'd always pick up really, really well. He went to college and took a course in foundation design, and now he's apprenticing as a tattoo artist.
So there is sort of a channel of different things that kids can go through, but yet they still can come out very well in their careers or wherever they're leading to, even if you are going through a separation, divorce. So there
Well,
can.
yeah, absolutely.
Mhm.
The one thing that you got to make sure you do for your kids, though, is you always need to encourage them and say, look, this is looking really good. You should maybe try it for a little bit longer or get more into depth. At the same time, you should encourage them to try something different.
Yeah, I
That's a
agree.
little outside their comfort zone,
Mhm.
and they may like something different, or they may not. But
Mhm.
you got to make sure that they try to experience as much as possible, so that way when they do get older, they're able to make an informed decision.
Now, was that both you and your wife in agreement to that? Like, did you, being in separate homes, did you still feel the same thing about the education part for your son? And was there any sort of challenges in that way when it came to wanting to see him pursue a career?
We try to encourage Ben together, um, in whatever he did. Unfortunately, his mom passed away when he was still in high school. So when she passed on, then I took a lot of the more of the responsibility of that parenting. Uh, but I think I tried to do everything that she would also approve of.
Oh, that was very highly of you just to feel that way about her, to try to keep it, in the same path with your son. I think that's very highly of you, Peter. So now that you were co-parenting and then now became a single parent on your own, how was that experience for you?
Parenting comes in different stages. You know, when you're starting out, you're telling your child what needs to be done and how to do it. And as they get older, the next stage basically is uh, watching them do it and explaining why things are done the way they're done, and more of a coaching kind of thing. And as as they get older, into their 20s, uh, it's now you take your hands off the rail and become more of their friend, and somebody that they can come to and bounce their ideas off of. That doesn't always necessarily happen until you get a little older than that, but you stay in touch. You keep asking them how things are going, and what's going on, what they're doing, and especially now with how life is right now with COVID,
Mhm.
it's really tough on everybody.
How old is he right now?
He's going to be 24 this year.
Yeah, so that is kind of tough for him as well. So if you look back at between co-parenting, between raising your son and being a father, was there any time that you can recall that was one of your biggest challenges?
My biggest challenges. Um, I would say my biggest challenge really is not necessarily with him, but with myself. Am I being a good father? Am I doing the best by him? Is there something that I could do better? And there's no book out there that can tell you that. And really, you're not going to ever know until you get to that point where it's like, wow, he's doing okay. He's I don't have to worry about him anymore. And it's not to say that I'm not there to give him the support that he needs. And it's I'm just there now to say, hey, I'm proud of you. It's and it doesn't work out as easily as that for everybody. But the thing is, you just keep going and work things through. It's you don't want to be a judge, somebody who's judging them. You want to be somebody who's supporting them and giving them ideas, planting a seed and saying, this might work, or have you thought of this, or should, do you want to do that? Or it's, it's just a communication you keep going. That's always changing.
Yeah. I think the most important message with today being this podcast on, co-parenting and being a single parent at the same time is just try to do your best and be the best parent you can be, offer the best support, and try to give them the most happiest life that you can. And I think that's being a great parent.
Yeah.
And I think also, as what you mentioned earlier about with your ex-wife, that you both, regardless of whether you had your differences in the marriage, that you made it work for your children, and you communicated, you set up a schedule, you talked, you called each other. And that's what's really important. I think people think that, going through a separation divorce, that the co-parenting is having to be this horrible situation where you're not going to get along and the children have to battle between homes and battle between, parents and so forth. And yes, there's an adjustment. Yes, they're going to have some difficulties, but I feel if you really talk it out and you work things out as best as you can, that it can come out. They can come out to be great kids,
Yeah. Well, that's the one thing that we agreed upon early in our separations is when it comes to parenting, we don't badmouth each other. And if we have a disagreement, we'll talk to each other away from the kids and talk it out that way, because you don't want to instill any wrong feelings into your kids. And that's one of the reasons why we try to do it that way. And, it's important to be on the same wavelength. You may not, I don't want to say you may not like it. You need to agree with it. You get your parenting, a father's parenting may be different from a mother's parenting. And there's nothing wrong with that, as long as it's not harmful to the child. But when it comes to being on the same wavelength on, what expectations are, that's where you got to kind of work together on as being one.
Yeah, and I think that's true. And I also believe that what happens in one person's home is their rules. And you hope that the rules are pretty similar. But what happens in mom's house is in mom's house. What happens in dad's house is in dad's house. You might allow a little bit of flexibility of bedtime, and she might allow a little flexibility about, dinner time, meaning, you got to eat your veggies. And dad might say, well, let's have pizza tonight, and or vice versa. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's not really hurting the child. But as long as the foundation of the rules and the parenting are there, and the two of you communicate that, that's what's the whole important part about co-parenting. And
Absolutely.
Yeah, and getting involved in their school and their education, getting involved in what events that they're in, getting involved in their health, setting up those things and schedule to know if there's anything going on health wise and, are they on vitamins? Are they taking their vitamins? Or, if they scratch their knee, make sure that, something is taken care of the other parent knows about. And that's what's important is setting that structure of foundation between two parents, not just automatically like, oh, what goes on in my house, I don't want you to know about it. It's none of your business. And like you mentioned earlier, not to badmouth the other parent. It's not about the relationship between the parents. It's about the relationship between the parents and the child.
Yeah. And that's another thing, being the relationship between the parent and the child is if you have a child at one place, well, let's just go. If the child, if my son was here, I could never turn around to my son and say, don't tell your mom, because he's going to tell her anyways.
Yeah,
And, and,
probably. Yeah.
and vice versa. And you don't want to put him into that position where he has to pick and choose,
Mhm.
because all that does is tear him apart.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
so if he needed to talk to somebody, whether it was her or myself, he was able to do that without judgment. He didn't have to worry about not saying it.
Right. And not picking sides and not
Exactly.
like setting up things that's going to cause conflict. And I thought, about what you're saying earlier about having his mom over when there was family events and, things like that. Now that's not as easy for everybody because if there's a new relationship and there is another partner, it's kind of tough. But if you can do it in a way where it's a business relationship, and it's in a respectful way, hopefully that the other partners in the moving on with relationships can understand that there will be a time that other parent's going to be at an event. And there's nothing wrong with that as long as you're all like adults and respectful. I think there's nothing wrong with having that other person there. Do you think, how do you feel about that part?
Well, yeah, it's what you said. I think is very, it's pretty accurate.
I think so too. So on our last question, going through your own separation divorce, what advice would you give to parents out there?
Going through separation and divorce,
Yeah. What would
uh,
you give what advice would you offer for anyone as a parent?
going through a separation or divorce, when you get down to it, is you need to take the emotion out of it, even though the emotions are high. But you need to take your emotions out of it because it's really now you're dealing with your kids, and you need to identify what the kids need, and what you would like, and work through that.
What do you mean? What you would like? Explain that a little bit.
I wanted my son for his birthday. Well, so does she. So we'd either go every other year, or we'd do something together if we were able to. In the beginning, obviously, that wasn't going to happen. But, every other Christmas, up to Christmas Eve, I had him. And then on Christmas morning, well, the end of Christmas Eve. And so she would have him on Christmas Day. And then that changed every year, on my birthdays, you know, and on her birthdays, because they're not always following me on the weekends. It may be on a weekday, if that was possible. If he had school the next day and, I was working late, it just doesn't make sense. So that's where you have to make sure you're, you know, doing things beneficial for your kids.
It's funny that you bring that up because I have this toolkit that I offer to all the parents. And a part of the toolkit is talking about the children in the sense of like doing it in the agreement with the children being one home to another or visiting, or like you said, when it's a birthday or when it's Christmas. When a couple is going through separation divorce, they should really think about the kids in the sense of long term. They're going to grow up. They're not always going to want to be with the parent every other weekend, or if it's a 50-50 split where, I have them have my home or your home. I think they really got to look at some flexibility when they look at that flexibility, they're not binding it into the agreement. So when they make the agreement up, they should just state, we will have them, 50-50, and we will, which could be agreed upon every other weekend. But however, things can change and adapt as they get older or as events come into our lives. So that way it's a flexibility between both parents, so that, because they don't think of long term. They just think of, well, I want them, every other weekend, and I want them every other week on a Wednesday, and I want them every other Christmas. But like, as you said, things can change. They can get older. Your lives can change. You can have other children in your life. You can have other partners in your life. So you don't want to bind it in an agreement, because then you got to go back and fight it again through courts. And I don't think sometimes parents think that through when they're making those decisions.
Well, no, and like I was saying in the beginning, of a separation and divorce, emotions are very high, and a lot of things that people are looking for are quite petty.
Mhm.
You know, so if it's a house, all right, who's going to get the house, or are we going to sell the house? That is something that has to make a decision on it.
Mhm.
But the little things, um, you know, uh, where it makes it petty, it is
A piece of furniture.
yeah, a piece of furniture. Exactly. It's ridiculous.
Mhm.
Is it really that important? And so that people end up losing the focus of what they're looking for. So if you get if you remove the emotion out of it, which again is very difficult, you sit down saying, what do I really want? You know, all this other material stuff is, it's like, we'll divide this up this way.
Mhm.
But when it comes to my kids, all right, what's fair? Not necessarily to the other partner, what's fair to them.
Yes. What's
And that is the important thing. Now, if it works out where it's good for everybody, which you may not feel that way at the time, but if it's good for everybody, great. But like as you said, you also need to be able to have flexibility. And as the kids get older, they are not going to be around.
Mhm.
Like, they're going to be off somewhere else. They're going to be, you know, living on their own and working and seeing their friends, and you are not going to be as important as you once were. No, and also, and they're going to go through personality changes too. So,
Absolutely.
when they're young, and innocent, they follow you like a puppy. When they get older, they get rebellious, and then they get older again. You're able to sit down and talk about the meaning of life.
Mhm. Yeah,
You know, it,
absolutely.
everything's a stage, a seasons of change.
You're absolutely right. And I think when parents go through separation, divorce, they don't look at that in their future. They just look at for now, and they're like, they don't want to lose their children, and they think they're going to lose their children for the other parent, or the other parent's going to be the favored parent, and I have to be the tough guy, and that my child's not going to like me, but yet I have to be there and discipline them and so forth. And it's, you know what, if you really just work things out, it will all work itself out, and the children will come out okay. And just let go of the small stuff and focus on growth and education and what's really important, that to give them values and morals and integrity. And those are the foundation of their future and their life. And that's what you really want to teach them, and life skills, right?
Absolutely.
Mhm. Well, that's great, Peter. So just any last words of wisdom from you, as the top three things that you say that would be so important for other parents to know?
Well, the best thing to do is when emotions are running high, walk away, come back, and then talk about it.
Okay.
Uh, think things through, also. uh, communication is one of the key things for any relationship, whether it's, you know, in a relationship or, with your kids or in the working world. Communication is key. So you got to learn to make sure that when you're talking to somebody, you're talking about, you know, uh, with the information and uh, the directness of what you're trying to ask in an orderly fashion. Uh, and another big thing, it really is listen. Uh, so people don't do enough listening in general. So it's like, so, like I said, walk away until you're calm, come back, talk about it in an orderly, in an organized manner, and then listen.
Mhm. Well, thank you again, Peter. All your information was very valuable. I'm sure all the parents are going to appreciate your comments. And I just want to thank our listeners for joining us today. So keep checking my website for new topics, real life stories, and experiences relating to separation, divorce. And like I always say, remember, there is a life after divorce.